Good evening, I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw. 3 years after the start of Moscow's full-scale invasion, Washington openly refused to stand with Ukraine, instead aligning itself with Russia, China and North Korea, autocratic regimes that voted against the UN resolution condemning Russia's war with Ukraine. What are the reactions in Kiev? More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. $500 billion needed to rebuild Ukraine after the war, and it's not over yet. Ramping up their security, Europeans bring nuclear sharing back to the table. Arrests and deportations. The Polish government takes decisive measures as foreign gangs try to gain a foothold in Poland. In what's being described as a seismic shift, Washington has sided with Moscow for the first time since its invasion of Ukraine, supporting a UN Security Council resolution that avoided criticism of the Kremlin's aggression. Experts say the move comes as Donald Trump's team tries to reposition Russia while the US seeks a deal to end the war. John Todd has this report.
Volunteers prepare to protect Ukraine's skies from Russian drones ahead of another night of terror. Across the Atlantic in New York, Moscow, meanwhile, found a new ally at the United Nations as Russia's representative and the US envoy voted in tandem for a Security Council resolution that did not blame the Kremlin for the conflict. London and Paris were highly critical of any move that absolved Russia.
There can be no equivalence between Russia and Ukraine in how this Council refers to this war. If we are to find a path to sustainable peace, the Council must be clear on the war's origins.
While France is fully committed to peace in Ukraine, we call for comprehensive, just and lasting peace, and certainly not for capitulation of the victim.
Earlier, at the UN General Assembly, the US and Russia also joined sides, in a move unthinkable before Donald Trump took office, as Washington opposed wording that criticized Russia and recognized Ukraine's pre-invasion borders. There were warnings for other countries ready to resume support for Russia.
Some of our member states now seem to believe that ending the war at any cost and restoring business as usual with Russia will be beneficial. As a representative of the country neighboring both Russia and Ukraine, I can tell you it will not. By normalizing relations with Moscow, you would be entrusting your security and economic stability to an autocrat and a war criminal.
This war has never been about Ukraine only. It is about a fundamental right of any nation to exist, to choose its own path, and to live free from aggression. If aggression is justified and a victim is blamed for its resilience and a will to survive, then no country is safe.
There are concerns that rehabilitation of Russia and failure to bring Vladimir Putin to book will have long-term consequences.
We see how aggressor and war criminal is coming back to international politics. This is very bad, not just for Ukraine, for everybody in the world, because that's what you are showing now can happen everywhere again, because nobody will be afraid of international law.
The acting US ambassador to the UN, Dorothy Shea, told the Security Council that the American neutral resolution that failed to identify Russia as the aggressor was the first step on a path to peace. Observers say as the US changes tack on Russia, Europe urgently needs to boost its support for Ukraine to make up for shortfalls left by any American exit.
Apart from supporting Ukraine in that diplomatic extent, also Europeans will need to be able to show a real firepower, both economically and militarily. And this is the main area where they still need to do a job of finding the right approach together in a unified way.
Back on the front line in Bucha, fighters in this women-only air defence unit practice before another long night. hoping that peace comes soon.
And we have breaking news for you from Kiev, so we take you there as we speak. Volodymyr Zelensky is apparently close to signing the deal on rare earth minerals, as reported by Financial Times. So let's go to our correspondents on site. Oz Katerji, our Ukrainian correspondent, and Don Arleth are both on the ground. Let's start with Oz. Oz, what can you tell more about this news?
Well, we understand this is something that's just developing. TVC World did understand that Ukrainian officials were moving towards signing the deal. However, this is just coming in now, apparently hinged on the US dropping one of its key demands, the pledge for $500 billion in future revenue prospects of rare earth minerals and oil and gas found in Ukraine going forward for the future. So this was a significant financial commitment from the Ukrainians. That reporting from the Financial Times is saying that demand now has been dropped. So the Ukrainians are moving towards signing it. We also understand from the US press this morning that some of the drafts that they'd seen referred to a free, sovereign and secure Ukraine. Those words are going to be reassuring to Kyiv, but there are also going to be voices in the administration who have looked at what has happened over the last few weeks with Donald Trump and asked whether they have a reliable partner in Washington to sign this deal with regardless. Either way, it looks like the Ukrainians are moving to signing this deal. They see it as being in Kyiv's interests. As to whether they can continue to receive financial, economic, military, humanitarian support from Washington, that remains to be seen. However, when it comes to the huge amount that Ukraine needs for reconstruction, they are looking to a deal like this and to a long-term commitment from the United States to help rebuild a post-war Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Don. Thank you so much, Oz. And let's now turn to Don. Tell us more about the military situation in Ukraine, because as we understand, it wasn't a peaceful night.
Yes, well, we had left Kyiv last night. Not too many attacks as compared to the previous, about a week we were there in Kyiv to report. There was one person injured due to an explosion, most likely from a Shahed drone. But overnight, 2 people were killed, 36 injured. And then, of course, shelling in the east killed another person in Kramatorsk, injuring 14, including 4 children. Now, most of the attacks overnight were concentrated in Sumy, Donetsk, Kherson, Kharkiv, but as well as there's that one injury in Kyiv. In addition, today, of course, Poland announcing a 200 million euro aid package, military aid package for Ukraine. The defense minister, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, has said that he would like to help Ukrainians keep safe. We don't know exactly what's in the package. We do know that Poland trains a lot of soldiers. About 80 to 90,000 Ukrainian troops have been trained in the European Union, and 1/3 of them have been trained in Poland alone. So we still don't know exactly what this includes, if it's just training or if it is indeed something additional, such as ammunition and what have you. But with all these political developments that we've had lately concerning Ukraine, I know that Ukraine is definitely appreciative of all the pledges and help that it continues to get from its allies, friends, and partners. Now back to you.
Don Arleth and Oz Katerji, thank you both for your contribution. We appreciate it. $524 billion, that's the estimated cost of Ukraine's post-war reconstruction. According to the report led by the World Bank, the projected number is 3 times the expected 2024 economic output of the country. Now, there are numerous ways to finance the restoration of Ukraine, and using frozen Russian assets might be one of them. Paweł Trzaskowski has more.
3 years from the onset of war, this is the scale of devastation in Ukraine. It is now estimated that over $500 billion would be needed to rebuild the country after the war, but this number might grow even further.
We do not know what is happening there on the occupied territory, which we do not have access to. We will only be able to assess that once the war is over and we can fully evaluate our losses.
One of the sources to cover these expenses could be frozen Russian assets. After Russia's full-scale invasion, the West froze around 300 billion belonging to the Russian central bank. And the interest from that money has already contributed to helping Ukraine.
So the first step was about the using of the interest from these frozen assets to finance the support to Ukraine.
The next step would be a complete seizure of these assets to finance the reconstruction. And to the surprise of many, Moscow even suggested that this money could be used for such a purpose. However, there is a caveat. The territory now forcibly controlled by Russia would benefit as well.
Occupied territories, they want this money back. So it means, well, okay, this is our money, but let's have a share in it. But the poisoned offer within is that this is still Ukrainian territory. Nobody has ceded them to it.
But the money, if allocated properly, could be a significant boost for the restoration of the country, something that Ukrainians are strongly advocating for.
Let's do this. Let's seize Russian assets. But I see there is no political will to do this, unfortunately. And that shows that Europe, internally, with the will of Europe, is not strong enough.
One of the staunchest opponents of using frozen Russian assets is Berlin. But the prospective chancellor plans to show strength differently, by arming Germany. Friedrich Merz is set to open talks with its potential coalition partner to quickly approve as much as $210 billion for special defense expenditure.
France is allegedly prepared to share its nuclear shield with its continental allies. For Europe's security during an evolving threat from Russia, effective nuclear deterrence is crucial. Can Europe instill fear to discourage military actions against it? Sonia Agata-Bishan reports.
For nuclear deterrence to be effective, the armed nation must demonstrate a threat of serious harm to its opponents. According to The Telegraph, France could deploy nuclear jet fighters to Germany for that exact purpose.
France has long-range planes, whether they're based in France, continue to be based in France or deployed to Germany, doesn't make a huge difference in that respect. But I do think it's symbolically potentially very important.
This news transpires amid Russia's continued aggression against Ukraine, while the US seems to be reducing its security commitments to Kyiv and Europe as a whole.
But we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
And Europe is in far more danger than we are. We have an ocean in between. Europe has nothing in between.
With respect to current deterrence landscape, NATO has a nuclear sharing arrangement with aircraft provided by a number of European states and the weapons supplied by the US. At present, there are no indications that the US would withdraw from this setup.
When Secretary Hegseth, the new Defense Secretary, was in Brussels, he was very clear that the Europeans would need to do more, play a bigger role in conventional defense, but he didn't say anything about the US reducing its role in nuclear deterrence.
Nonetheless, Friedrich Merz, confident to become Germany's next chancellor, expressed an interest in a more Europe-centric arrangement to enhance independence from the US.
We have to talk to the British and French whether their nuclear protection could also be extended to us.
The two countries have nuclear weapons. France's deterrent functions independently of NATO, while Britain's is central to the alliance's defense strategy. When Merz reflected on European defense, Poland's significance did not go unnoticed.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is an important partner in these strategic issues of our defence capability. And once again, the message must be very clear. Europe is united and cohesive.
But the idea of European nuclear deterrence is not new. This is what the French president proposed in 2020.
Our commitment for European partners' security and their defence is the natural expression of our increasing solidarity. That said, I want to start a strategic dialogue with our European partners about the role of French nuclear deterrence in our collective security.
At the time, the German government did not act on the proposal. Although enthusiasm for joint deterrence has since increased, key issues such as decision-making authority and cost-sharing remain unanswered, complicating the establishment of a European arrangement.
Poland and the Baltic states are ramping up their security ahead of the next NATO summit in Hague. While Lithuania and Latvia are increasing their defense spending, Poland is launching a security mission in the Baltic states. Franciszek Pilis reports.
From late March to mid-July, these aircraft will be flying over Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. They are Polish F-16 fighter jets, and for that 5-month period, they will support NATO forces on air policing missions in the Baltic region.
This mission's objective is not only preparing for a crisis and the triggering of specific articles whenever the security of a NATO member is endangered, but also guaranteeing security.
The mission, part of NATO operations entitled Baltic Air Policing, will see 4 of the aircraft and 150 Polish soldiers stationed in the Baltic states. Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia do not have their own warplanes, prompting other NATO allies, including Poland, to fill the gaps. Despite their shortcomings in terms of air control, Latvia continues to up its defense spending, as confirmed during the meeting between the presidents of Poland and Latvia in Warsaw, Andrzej Duda and Edgars Rinkiewicz respectively.
I spoke with the Latvian president about the preparations for the upcoming NATO summit and defense spending. I said that we are nearly at 5% this year in terms of our budget plans for defense expenditure. The president also said that Latvia is increasing its spending as well, so we are, you could say, at the forefront of the alliance when it comes to implementing our commitments.
Meanwhile, in January this year, Lithuania committed to allocating between 5 and 6% of its GDP to defense from 2026 to 2030, showing just how serious the Baltic states take the matter of their own defense given the current security challenges.
Foreign gangs are trying to penetrate Poland. According to Polish Interior Ministry, around 5% of criminal suspects in 2024 were foreigners. To counter this developing threat, the Polish government is promising decisive steps and strengthening police forces.
Drugs and arms dealing, extortion, brutal gang fights. These are the main areas of activity of foreign gangs seeping into Poland. The government is taking decisive measures.
I have received a detailed report from the Minister of Internal Affairs about the decisive actions our law enforcement agencies are taking to combat foreign gangs. Numerous arrests have been made. It's time for deportation.
Polish police data shows the number of deportations in 2024 was counted in the thousands.
We deported 8,000 people last year. That's a lot. It's not an insignificant number. Add to that, we have hundreds of people in jail.
According to Tomasz Siemoniak, crimes committed by members of foreign gangs are to be reported every week.
Last week in Warsaw, there was a knife fight in which foreigners were involved. 1 person was killed, some were arrested.
Since the beginning of 2025, more than 2,600 foreigners have been charged with committing crimes in Poland. In February, a joint border guard and police unit carried out an action aimed at combating the illegal migration of foreigners. More than 1,400 people were detained, and a deportation procedure has been initiated against 398 of them.
3 years into the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the war continues, but so does Ukrainian spirit. The Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra is taking the stage in Warsaw for a special concert to mark the 3rd anniversary of the war. This unique cultural initiative, founded in 2022 by a Canadian-Ukrainian conductor, Kerry Lynn Wilson, has been advocating for Ukraine's freedom and resilience. The New York Met Opera and the Polish National Opera have played a vital role in the initiative that has gained widespread critical acclaim. Tonight, they'll shake Warsaw once again with their determination through Beethoven's 9th Symphony. Aisha Abachi has more.
We are not politicians, we are musicians, but now we must be both. These words from the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra capture the essence of this concert at the Polish National Opera, given for the 3rd year anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Performing Beethoven's Symphony No. 9, these musicians, many of them refugees directly affected by the war, are turning their art into a powerful statement of resilience and defiance.
Well, I've turned into a soldier, let's say. I was a conductor, a musician, making wonderful music around the world, but this has given me an opportunity to fight for freedom, to fight for the rights of a nation that has been the victim of something so horrible. From the beginning of the invasion, I created this orchestra as a direct response, and so my baton is my weapon.
No matter what the outcome of the war, I think it's very important that Ukraine's cultural identity, its cultural legacy continue.
We are both politicians and musicians, but we have a voice, and we have instruments, we have our power, our fight inside us, and we want to be here.
For the organizers, this is more than a concert. It's a mission to defend Ukraine's liberty and a call to protect democracy. The Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra stands as a symbol of that fight, and Beethoven's Ninth Symphony carries a timeless message: good will overcome evil. And for those on this journey, it has been truly transformative. Reporting from Warsaw for TVP World, Aisha Baja.
And as you can imagine, no Russian composer was selected for this concert. It was a historic vote at the United Nations General Assembly. Yesterday, for the very first time, the American representative aligned herself with the Russian counterpart in voting against a resolution in which UN member states condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Despite US opposition, the adopted text is sheer proof of just how isolated the US is in its push to be conciliatory towards Russia in brokering a deal to end the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, let's turn to Yulia Osmolowska, Director Globsec Kiev, who joins us tonight. Good evening, madam. Thank you for joining.
Good evening.
So, a defeat, imagery defeat, PR defeat, there's no other way to put it. How important, according to you, is this blow for the US image as the leader of the free world so far? And what does it say about the US being a long-term partner, an ally of Ukraine?
I think the most important, what kind of lessons the Americans will draw for themselves out of this voting and this result. The most illustrative probably out of this is that the original text of the American suggested draft was then later amended by France and supported by a number of European capitals, which actually finally succeeded in including the reference to the full-scale invasion of Russian Federation into Ukraine, then calling for the territorial integrity of Ukraine and ending with lasting comprehensive peace based on the UN Charter. So basically, I think that these amendments are very remarkable when it comes to the clear distinction between the US position and the European position when it comes to the current view of the full-scale invasion of Russian Federation into Ukraine. When it comes to the diplomatic moves in the General Assembly. So it's definitely, we can see a couple of tricks in there because the Americans then successfully passed the original text through the United Nations Security Council, resolutions of which are having this legal binding nature, whereas the General Assembly resolution doesn't. So in this case, we see this kind of dancing around diplomacy. But the most important, yes, I begin with what I started. So what kind of lessons the Americans themselves will draw out of this voting and what's going on in the United Nations.
And what if this strategy by the United States proved effective? After all, we learned that a rare earth deal is just about to be signed. Volodymyr Zelensky is close to signing the deal with the United States, with Donald Trump's administration. So what more can you tell about that?
Well, the information that we receive has been quite contradictory and conflicting. But for me, as a former diplomat, the very beginning was quite harsh when Americans submitted the draft and they expected Ukrainians to sign it unconditionally. So even not discussing the content, which normally is the procedure in negotiations when you discuss the draft text. So right now, Ukrainian side obviously rejected the first first proposal, and then the parties engaged into consultations. And right now, as far as we understand, they're coming to sort of compromised vision of that. For Ukrainians, definitely this agreement is the way to establish long-lasting or long-term partnership with Americans, with their support. And the rationale behind it was that having more of American presence in business and economy in Ukraine's industry would definitely be indirect kind of guarantee that the foreign aggressors and Russia, namely, won't be attacking the country once again. The tricky point about this agreement is actually that Russians are trying to trade the potential of cooperation with the Americans on the Ukrainian rare earth materials, which currently possessed on the temporary occupied territories. And Russians are offering these kind of opportunities for Americans, so which actually raises the question of legality of this move, because the territory has never been recognized as a territory that belongs to Russia. So basically, this is the challenge that we see at the moment. But as far as we know, in this draft agreement, there are the provisions that the agreement also covers the rare earth materials which Ukraine has in possession in temporary occupied territories that could be available once these territories are deoccupied.
But having said that, it's a good sign that Donald Trump is going to sign this deal with Volodymyr Zelensky and not with Vladimir Putin. That would tell that the United States are recognizing this territory as belonging to Ukraine, right?
Yeah, it's definitely the matter of interpretations. But if we can link with the previous question, the explanations of Americans why they opted for this softer language of the resolution is because they currently aspiring to have this role of mediator, and they don't want to alienate both sides. This is why they used this softer language in the resolution. But on the other hand, actually, I'm questioning, yes, probably they're making Russian side more favorable into getting into communications with Americans. But the recent statement of American officials towards Ukrainian officials actually raises the brows whether this doesn't alienate Ukraine from Americans, and America acting in goodwill as non-biased broker.
So how exactly will this be proceeded? So the United States will invest their money in taking the resources from Ukraine, and who exactly is going to be overseeing this process? European troops, you think?
It's a bit different story, because the agreement obviously is about the time when the ceasefire is reached and the sort of peace settlement is negotiated and accepted by both sides. And I have to remind you that it's eventually not the President Zelensky who will be signing the agreement, but actually the Ukrainian parliament who has to ratify it at the end. Both agreements actually on rare earth materials and also this peace settlement. So this will be probably the most tricky point. And then only then the time will come for the European troops as potential participants of this peacekeeping. And then the question comes, what these troops are designed for, what they will be actually doing, because there is still polemic about whether they're being seen as a deterrence force, as a peacekeeping force, as a peace implementing force, and where they will be stationed, in which quantity, and how the process of rotation will be organized, and what form of support from America they will receive, because they definitely need this support. And the statements that we received from the recent meeting of President Trump and President of France, Macron, that Trump is actually not excluding that there will be backing of some kind from the United States. But what this some kind means actually still remain unclear.
So just as a note to say, the Ukrainian parliament extended the martial law today, reaffirming the position of Volodymyr Zelensky as a legally elected president. All right, so on the other hand, Russian army, which is ramping up its capabilities, this is a very big concern for the Europeans. Do you see, and can you imagine a situation where the United States actively and effectively counteracts right now these efforts by the Russians?
in Ukraine, we definitely don't have any illusions that Russians have no intentions to stop the war, and they will be using this peace settlement and ceasefire as the pause for them to ramp up and to be ready to attack again. So nobody is actually optimistic about that. So definitely, it remains to be seen still how this dialogue between the United States and Russia will continue, because there is also another explanation of this swift rapprochement, if I may use this phrase, of United States with Russia, is actually not because they support the Russian position, but because they would like to lose the alliance which is being formed right now between China and Russia. So I think that it's still very early stage. However, it's already been a lot said that makes our expectations quite pessimistic. But on the other hand, this is a very good opportunity for Europeans to get united and actually to act in a single voice, for which actually I see a lot of positive signs. And definitely Ukraine should be viewed as part of this, as an asset for European security, not as liability or the cause for insecurity.
Julia Osmolowska, Director at Globsec, Kyiv, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks and World News Tonight. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.